Anunnaki are the extraterrestrial civilization generally responsible for the alteration of your genetic structure from what you would call the natural hominid that existed on your planet called Homo erectus to the idea of now what you call yourselves to be Homo sapien. In altering the genetic structure by including some of the Anunnaki DNA, they allowed you to create or exist in its present form, the human being, as you call yourselves, so that they would have a relationship to the Anunnaki, to be utilized in a variety of ways in that relationship, as workers, as companions, in a variety of ways, for their purposes of visiting your world, which fundamentally was to aid and assist them in mining minerals, gold in particular, that would allow them to alter the weather patterns of their own planet and make adjustments in that way to their energy fields. Now, the group of Anunnaki that actually visited your world, that was originally consigned to find those minerals and bring them back to the home world, were actually, to begin with, assigned to simply do this task themselves. Eventually, they found that this was something that was relatively difficult for them to do on their own, and so they believed they needed what you would call a workforce in order to aid and assist them. And knowing that there was a natural indigenous being upon the planet that was similar in form to them, they understood that they could genetically alter it to aid and assist them in this way by upgrading it, so to speak, to something more similar to their own form, and thus, by thus creating that force, allow that force to work in the mines to extract the gold and other minerals that they require, eventually also developing a long-term relationship with them in a variety of ways, even to the point of companionship many, many years after that. Now, this began somewhere around 500,000 of your years ago in the general areas that you call the Middle East and the African continent. And those branches of the hominid species that were not altered genetically by the Anunnaki evolved on their own in parallel to the human beings on your planet that the Anunnaki had created. And those that were not altered eventually evolved into the form you now call Sasquatch. So the idea is that if you had not been altered at all, today you would all be Sasquatch. But because you were altered, because you were evolved in that way, you became human beings. That you became, eventually there were also interminglings between some of the humans of the time and the Anunnaki on the world, and these created births, natural births of beings that you have in your legends come to call the so-called demigods and so forth. Now, the Anunnaki were much taller in general than you are, and some of the earlier races on your planet of humanity were also much taller than most of you, although you are regaining not only your height again, but also your longevity, because in times past, a lot of the genes were passed along to the human beings that were genetically created that allowed them to live for hundreds of years, because the Anunnaki lived for thousands of years. The idea is that you are regaining this ability again. The genetic material is being opened up again because of new vibrations that are now existing in this present day on your planet, allowing you more longevity, allowing you greater height, greater health, greater vitality. And you are opening up those connections energetically to the Anunnaki and those genetic materials that you contain. Now, of course, the Anunnaki themselves also contained a mixture of different genetics from different races. We will not get into that so much right now, although you can certainly